Map true stories. I used to think I was healing, that the quiet meant peace, that the lack of conflict meant growth. But looking back now, I wasn't healing at all. I was just learning how to disappear. For most of my life, I believed that being easygoing was a strength. I was proud of how calm I was, how understanding, how rarely I fought with anyone. People described me as mature, level-headed, someone who didn't let things get to them. And for a long time, I believed that meant I was doing something right. I grew up in a house where conflict was loud, where arguments lingered in the air, where tension didn't need words to be felt. So early on, I learned a simple rule. If you don't push, if you don't complain, if you don't react, things stay calm. That lesson followed me into adulthood, into friendships, into work, and especially into my relationships. When I met my partner, everything felt easy. They were charming, attentive, emotionally aware, the kind of person who spoke softly and confidently, someone who seemed grounded, secure, and very sure of what they wanted. At first, I admired that certainty. It felt reassuring, like I didn't have to question things, or like someone else was finally steering. Small moments started slipping by, moments I noticed, but didn't name. If I hesitated about a plan, they'd gently explain why it made more sense their way. If something bothered me, they'd ask if I was sure I wasn't overthinking it, if I needed space. They'd remind me that distance wasn't healthy. None of it sounded cruel. None of it sounded controlling. In fact, it all sounded reasonable. And every time I felt that small internal resistance, that quiet discomfort, I told myself the same thing. This is what compromise looks like. So I adjusted. I softened. I adapted. I stopped bringing things up unless they felt important enough. And slowly, very slowly, my definition of important enough shrank. If a comment stung, I let it pass. If a boundary felt crossed, I told myself it wasn't intentional. If I felt unseen, I assumed I hadn't explained myself well enough. And when friends asked how things were going, I said we were doing great, because technically we didn't fight, we didn't raise our voices, we didn't have drama, but something else was happening, something quieter. I started choosing my words carefully, editing my reactions, running conversations through my head before speaking. Not because I was afraid of anger, but because I was afraid of being difficult. I didn't want to be the source of tension. I didn't want to disrupt the peace. I didn't want to be someone who always has a problem. So when something bothered me, I reframed it, minimized it, swallowed it. And each time I did, I told myself it was growth, healing, until one day I realized something unsettling. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Not clearly, not confidently. I knew what they preferred, what they valued, what they believed was healthy. But when someone asked me how I felt, what I needed, what I wanted next, my mind went blank. That scared me. I noticed how exhausted I felt after conversations, how often I replayed them later, wondering if I'd said too much or too little. I noticed how I apologized automatically, even when I wasn't sure what I'd done wrong. I noticed how relieved I felt when plans were canceled, because it meant one less decision, one less moment to navigate. And still, I told myself this was normal, that relationships require effort. That discomfort was part of growth. Until a moment arrived that I couldn't reframe. We were having what should have been a small conversation, something logistical, low stakes. I expressed a preference, not a demand, not an accusation, just a preference. And they paused, then calmly explained why my preference didn't make sense, why it wasn't practical, why it wasn't aligned with our goals. And something inside me shut down. Not in anger, not in sadness, in recognition. Because I realized this wasn't a discussion, it was a correction. And suddenly, I saw the pattern clearly. Every disagreement ended with me adjusting. Every compromise leaned one direction. Every moment of tension resolved when I backed down. That's when the truth landed. I wasn't peaceful. I was compliant. I wasn't healed. I was silent. I wasn't avoiding conflict because I was mature. I was avoiding it because I was afraid. Afraid of being too much. Afraid of losing connection. Afraid that asserting myself would make me unlovable. That realization hurt more than any argument ever had, because it meant I had been disappearing, voluntarily, quietly, calling it growth. Leaving wasn't dramatic. There was no explosion, no betrayal, no single breaking point. Just an accumulation of moments where I chose harmony over honesty until I couldn't hear myself anymore. When I finally stepped away, people were confused. They said the relationship looked healthy, that we seemed stable, that we never fought. And that's the part they didn't see. Peace without truth isn't peace, it's avoidance. Healing doesn't mean silencing yourself. It means trusting that your voice deserves space, even when it creates tension. Because real safety isn't the absence of conflict. It's knowing you can speak and still be met. I thought I was healing, but I was just learning how to stay quiet. And unlearning that was the hardest and healthiest thing I've ever done.